Welcome everyone to the AIS Ask an Architect. Thanks so much, listeners, for joining in. We're joined by Irving Gonzalez. And I always like to start from the beginning. What sparked your interest in studying and pursuing architecture?
So the short story is that I had originally wanted to be a doctor, like my father, who was in the medical corps in the Army, and he had all these medical books. I liked law. I liked drawing. I was always sketching, and I found that architecture, in essence, kind of brought all of those things together because it's about health, safety, and welfare, but there's the creative side to it. And then there's the positive impact that architecture brings to our communities. And geez, we encounter it every single day. So there's that legacy that the profession provides for all of our society.
Lovely. And do you have any early memories when you were either applying to college or in architecture school on just fond memories of studying architecture?
Well, as you can tell, I went to Cal, and so we had Worcester Hall, which was in a building of brutalism design, which wasn't very inspirational in terms of the environment, but obviously taught us a lot of technical stuff. But I think it's more about the people, the camaraderie amongst ourselves, as students, but then also what it was that who we were designing for. So that was always fun, and it does carry through to the profession, and my practice in particular, which will be celebrating 35 years come May.
Congratulations. And that's
Thank
such a perfect segue. I was going to ask, so what was your journey post-graduation and how did you get to be in your current role?
It was, excuse me, it was unique in a sense that it was baptism by fire. I was fortunate enough on a dare and a bet to get my first job while I was still a junior at Cal. And then that job lasted only through the summer, but it introduced me to that architect's former boss in San Francisco. I went to work for him. He passed away after 7 years, and I didn't have my license just yet. And so I went and practiced or worked at another firm, got through all of my exams, and was able to get my license and then start my practice the year after. So, I never looked back, although I had wanted to go back to grad school, but the fact that it became so easy to just have a practice, have the work coming in, have a great support from wonderful clients, that I never did. But, my masters of life has been the practice.
Lovely. I mean, congratulations on having your own firm.
Thank you.
Um, Thinking back on those early times as a firm owner, what were the kind of hardships and successes of, starting off on your own?
That's a great question. The hardships, I think many of the students, even today, find a challenge in that they don't teach you business or how to run a practice in school. There's a lack of technical education in terms of how a building goes together, and how to detail a building once you do figure out how it goes together. I think the successes are that our community of designers and creatives are such that there are probably fewer of those with egos than those that are willing to share their knowledge. And if you can get connected to those individuals or those firms, you will learn a tremendous amount that will be beneficial to you, especially in terms of their openness to be able to share all that knowledge.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I always appreciate when the architecture community is so generous with all the information they provide, and the goods and the bads.
Yeah.
Um, Thinking about starting off and your education, what made you choose to stay in California and continue practicing in that area?
Excuse me. I think it dealt more with the fact that I grew up in the Bay Area. I did get offers to move to New York or up to Portland to be a partner in a practice, but I'm a product of a single parent household, and I was an only child on top of that. So it and the first American born to go to college. So I think a lot of that sort of kept me close to home with mom, and I didn't find a better alternative. Although I knew that if I wanted to, I could also apply for reciprocity and be able to practice and work. And of course, fast forward to the pandemic and the current time and technology that we're in, you could practice remotely just about anywhere. So I wouldn't say that was foresight, but it is a fortunate thing about the practice and the profession.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely can relate. Like first generation, so many of our members, as well as so many students are just first generation, just trying to navigate like the whole architecture realm. So applause to you for making it through and continuing to like give back time and time again. Um, one of the questions I always love to ask is what is a project that you were most proud of, either at school or work or both?
Ah, there are many, but I think the ones that are most impactful are the ones where you you can basically exponentially affect in a positive way the lives of those that you've designed for or that are going to be using or living in your building. So very early on, as because of my upbringing, I decided that I wanted to do work for nonprofits. So I was fortunate enough working for Dennis Shanaher, who ended up being my mentor, that he did a lot of work for the Catholic Church. And as a result, I did a lot of work for, many of the archdioceses and dioceses all up and down California, which then led to another baptism by fire when there was an earthquake, the 1989 Loma Prieta, and I was asked to work on a project for affordable housing for a nonprofit also. And that's where I cut my teeth in that realm and space, and earned a good reputation, and have since then been working on primarily affordable housing for people who have lesser means.
Yeah, that's amazing. Again, like we get so many students who like want to do affordable housing, so it's nice to like meet someone who does it as practice and as part of your mission.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a great satisfaction in what we do, and of course, as the last 10 years or more have kind of proven, both nationally and most specifically here in the Bay Area, housing is very expensive to build, and there are many people who are, uh, uh, without, if you will. I didn't want to say homeless. I wanted to say unhoused. That was the current term. Yeah, and so there is a great need, and it's great to work with partners that are able to provide that for them.
Absolutely. And I think you're even touching upon some subjects that like, society is facing right now. And I'm just curious also on like your perspective on like what are some of opportunities and challenges that the architecture field is facing?
Well, even when I was president, it's always about relevancy. That for example, you see a lot of folks doing ADUs. This is one of the quickest ways that the zoning and planning codes have been modified by the states to allow for increasing density and urban infill to increase the amount of housing. There are a lot of folks who are not architects necessarily that are doing these, and you sort of see the difference between an architect designed residence, an ADU in this case, versus those that are not. I think that that's what we bring to the table in terms of our creativity and being able to work within those zoning regulations and the state mandates to be able to design for that kind of housing, and that fits within the context of the neighborhoods. I think that that is one of the key things. in terms of a small scale value that we bring. But then in the larger sense, there is so much more that architects provide besides just the the built environment. It's everything that's around it and the urbanity and the fabric in which all of these are made to fit in.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's definitely a call towards architects to like even recognize that within themselves and realize like all the abilities and input that like, architects and designers can do. And it's really empowering to hear, and it's glad to hear it from you. Um, you I know we talked about it a little bit before, but you mentioned president. So you want to kind of give me a story of how you got to be president and, any like highlights of being in that role?
Well, as I mentioned, working with nonprofits is really what got me interested, along with my profession, to be able to give something back. I had the great fortune very early on as a young designer, before I got my license, to have been back then they called it something else. Well, sponsored, yes. Back then, when you became a member of the AIA, you had to have a sponsor. So I had a sponsor early on, and I found that this was such a rich community. So that opened a lot of doors. In that regards, I always contributed and learned from those that gave of their time and knowledge. And so I became a board member. And during that, I think it was a total of 6 or 7 years, because you also stay on the year after you're a board president. I was able to contribute and work locally with the planning departments and such, and other organizations nationally. And then I was asked to become board president for 2015, which was an amazing year. It is a job into and of itself. And as a small firm practitioner, there was a lot of balancing. Luckily, I had great staff to be able to support the office while I was meeting my responsibilities and duties as the board president. It was really great because there got to meet the big SIBs, which are chapter firms with 1,000 members or more. Got to go to what is it called? Oh gosh, I forgot. Anyway, a lot of national responsibilities, and got to come out to Washington DC as well. So it was really exciting. It also allowed me to be introduced to a number of people that were influential in being able to make decisions. And you spoke about empowerment. I think that's one of the greatest things of being either a citizen architect or an advocate, is that you do carry a certain level of stature, and with that comes responsibility, but it allows you to affect positive change. You do have a voice. And that was one of the things that I was able to lend to the smaller firms of 5 or less or 10 or less, is to elevate them so that their needs would be met. Whereas, national didn't always, meet that requirement or provide that for them. So that was really great. We made a difference in that regards.
Absolutely. And congrats to you for balancing both. I know like coming from New York with AI New York and seeing AI Brooklyn and all that, like it's definitely a job in itself. And plus one to that, seeing everyone being so attentive and supportive, even towards us as AIS, it's been really sweet to see. And again, like even just sharing time and energies goes a
Mm,
long way.
absolutely.
Um, you mentioned all the people that, meeting all these people and having this influence of like being a citizen architect and all that. I curious, who do you look up to, both, in terms of like people in the industry, but also in general?
Wow, here again, there are many. I mean, there are the luminaries, but I think it's those that are sort of in the middle that are the most influential to me. I think one of the folks that I'm really excited to see making her way into the national spotlight is Emily Grandstaff-Rice, which is the new AIA national president. I met her when I was board president during those big SIB meetings up in Portland and through the national meetings. I think having been raised primarily by my mom, obviously, and in fact, my family is mostly women. It has always been rewarding to see women be raised in terms of their voice, elevated in terms of their stature. And, they are, the women in my family were very entrepreneurial. So I think that's where I got, the aspect of wanting to be, my own firm owner. And so seeing women now in a position of being able to voice the needs of the architects in our profession, whether they are AIA members or not, I think is really important, because there is a dynamic as well as an influence that they have in terms of everyday lives that aren't always necessarily heard. And the fact that the following year will be that of a woman, a person of color, I think is also very important as well. And in fact, I meant to look this up, but I don't even think there is a Latino president in the history of the AIA. So I would like to see that as well at some point.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like these past few years, even being right, a female in as an emerging professional, it's been so inspiring to see, women just take up leadership, which isn't necessarily always reflected in all of the firms. So it's nice to see like these organizations, spearheading that and being that example, and to
Yes,
say, like, if they could run AIA, if they could run NOMA, if they could run all these organizations, they could certainly run a firm. Um,
absolutely.
yeah. And going into kind of, you know, with your time so far in your in your career, is there any advice you would give to either people in high school or people in college choosing architecture as something that they want to pursue?
From what I've learned and what I practiced in my own education while at Cal is that if you're not getting what you need, ask for help. If they don't provide it to you, seek it out yourself, educate yourself, and get that information that you need, whether it be technical or resource based, or even inspirational. Find a person that you feel highly about that can motivate you and inspire you, as well as be willing to share that information freely and unconditionally. I think that's huge, because it is a very competitive profession. But when you do get into that right realm of support, it is super exciting, and it really makes it worth coming to work every day. And as they say, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah, I could definitely hear it from your voice. That's definitely where you are in life, and it's just really nice to see a happy architect. I think there's tends to be, some mystery
Yeah,
towards the lifestyle.
yeah.
Um, I do want to contribute, part of it is probably because you have amazing weather in California, but you probably have such an amazing firm and projects. And again, hearing that you're pursuing like affordable housing and things that you like find interesting, and that make a difference, and not just in architecture, but in the world.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
it is what you make of it. Some people will take on in an early stage, small projects to get started. And they say, gosh, I'm so tired of doing decks and yards and little additions and everything. But, if you take the point that, or the attitude, which is huge in this profession, having a good attitude, and say, hey, look, I can make this the best little addition or remodel, and then move from there. People will, one, see the passion that you have, two, see the quality of the design that you can promote and bring to the client. And that starts to build value. Value is what in our profession gives us the relevancy, and also the ability to be able to say, we can make a great living because we have earned our keep, and this is what, how we make our living. And to that point earlier, for me, when I stepped away from this, working for these other architects, and I thought, well, I'll go ahead and open my practice. I'll work a few years, pay off a few bills. I called it a working vacation. And I had eventually planned to go to work for MLTW. You guys will have to look that up. Moreland and Turnbull Whitaker, or some other name firm like that. I found that I never got to that point. But because of the connections, the relationships, and the camaraderie that I was able to develop over the years, even though I'm a small firm, we work on really large projects, but it's through partnerships. What we're able to do is work with David Baker and other major firms. And in fact, we got a call from A+I out of New York wanting to do a local project with us here. And that's because, one, of the reputation, but two, you have the best of both worlds. You still have your own practice, and yet you still are able to work on the much larger projects that get that national recognition. So, it's still a working vacation 35 years later.
Sounds like a fun one though. Yeah, it's so interesting because it again, you mentioned this earlier about like being able to like work virtually or work just around the world
Yep.
based on your partnerships. Like that's something that I think architecture school kind of forgets to highlight as much, because it really gives you access to a world, like to the world, without necessarily having to like travel it
Mhm.
to build those connections. But that's amazing.
But when
Um
you do get to travel, take
yeah,
advantage of it, because it's, culturally, one of the things about traveling is that a lot of prejudices, melt away when you meet other cultures in other countries. Secondly, you get charged. Charged up. I had a great professor at UC Berkeley who was so passionate about European architecture and the history that it was amazing. And to see what he saw through his eyes, what we have as a basis of the work that we do, was very inspirational. So definitely, latch on to those folks like that.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm only like a few months out of graduation. But yeah, my studio professors are just like architecture professors still stay with me. I'm just like, why are you still right after all these months? Um,
That's great.
yeah. So wrapping up with two more questions. Hopefully they're a little easy. How can our listeners and readers follow you and your projects?
That's something that of late has been sort of burning in the back of my mind here. We need to update our website. So I'm in the process of trying to get a web designer to do that, because we've got a wealth of projects from the last 2.5 years through the pandemic that have not yet been posted. But I do manage every once in a while to post on social media, Instagram, no longer a Twitter guy. Now it's Mastodon. And then of course Facebook. So every once in a while we do push out a few little updates to folks. But I'm also available, directly if anybody ever wants to reach out. Easy to find.
Wonderful. Yeah, we have so many California chapters or just people interested heading to the West Coast to either study or practice. So I'm sure you'll get a few emails
I hope
after
so.
this gets published.
Happy to help.
Yeah. And our very last question is, and this is something I always like to get because it really just like speaks to you as an individual, and your take on architecture is like, what is your hottest take on architecture?
Hmm. My hottest take. What do you mean by that exactly?
So some examples are like another way to phrase it is like maybe something that might be a little controversial, but you personally lean one way or another. So I think, there's sometimes studio professors or there would just be a studio culture of like, you have to do all-nighters, and then our hot take would be, no, you don't have to do
Oh, no,
all-nighters.
that's okay. Okay. No, that that's a really good point because you, in this day and age, there is no reason, okay, so here's a couple of things. One, no internship should be free. It should always be paid. Okay. Secondly, there's no reason to spend any more time than necessary in terms of your daily work activity. The most important thing is work-life balance. The more that you are able to work out, enjoy life outside of the practice, what it does is it enriches your life experiences, which you then bring as part of that creative re-energizing to your solutions and to the practice and the work that you're currently doing. I think that's most important. As an example, a lot of times you see sort of this ageism challenge, as well as the continued lack of diversity, inclusion, and equity with women and architects of color. And so one of the things that I'm beginning to pivot on is looking at former colleagues or friends of theirs that are have recently started a family, left the profession, or put it aside for a while, and asking them, hey, listen, do you want to get back into the profession? I know you're raising a family, but you can work remotely and you don't have to do it full time. But instead of having a full-time staff, I'm able to look at bringing women, especially, back into the profession, and we help each other out. So I think that that's really important. And for those of you who watched the Super Bowl and the halftime performance by Rihanna, it was very subtle, but of course we all know she was pregnant and performing, and kudos to her to be able to demonstrate that you can do a lot as a mom. And so I think that's, again, work-life balance. I think that's very important because there is room. And in fact, my daughter, who just she went to Parsons School of Interior Design, she just had her baby. He's 3 months old now. And she is currently balancing raising a child and working remotely for a design build firm. So that's what sparked me to sort of see about trying to bring folks back into the fold and support them.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I wish it wasn't such a hot take, or like, that's, I just really appreciate that because there are so many people, and even my friends, and even to myself to an extent, that are a little fearful of like what happens when we do want to like live a life, and the architecture field just isn't forgiving as much, and especially when you hear all these stories that people who have left. So thank you so much for even like doing all that great work to outreach. I know it's something not easy to start up those conversations just because it feels like there's a level of shame or some negativity, but I'm glad you're like bringing it to light.
Well, I think that's you bring up a very good point. I think the fact that that needs to be brought out into the open, talked
Yeah.
about openly and honestly, because many people have much to contribute to the
Mm.
profession, but also to just the way that we live, and that life does go on. And there is no shame there, and it should not even be a stigma. It should
Yeah.
be something that is accepted as a norm, because that is what life is all about. And it can be incorporated into the design, could be incorporated into the design practice with having nursing stations, areas where you could take a little break. Even pets. I have my golden doodle down here. Being able to bring your dog to work. I think that's very important. We're stressed out as it is. And I think anything that we can do to sort of nurture an inclusive and beneficial work space and environment, I think, is very important. We as designers and creatives have a lot to contribute.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, I think those are all the questions from my end. Thank you so much for joining and to being again one of our first interviews for AIA or AAA, sorry. We're kickstarting this off since the pandemic, everything's just been on the back burner, but we're so happy to bring this sort of interview programming engagement with our members. Yeah, and I'll end it with if you have any questions for me or for AIS.
Well, one question and then one comment to what you just said. I think it's great that AIS has spearheaded this, because the earlier you start in developing your relationships and networking with your colleagues and friends, the sooner you will get to reach your goal, and it enriches your professional lifestyle. I think it's great that you guys are doing this on such a broad based manner. So kudos to you guys for doing that. It's fantastic. And then I guess my question is, how did this come about and why did it take so long?
Absolutely. I believe Austin Architect, it must have started in like 2015 or 2016 with Nick Surface. And as you could see with a lot of the old videos, it was in person, there was a couch involved, it was a very like sit down talk of like what is architecture, what does it mean to be an architect? And then there's so many changes of leadership, not just with AIS, but across so many organizations. And then the pandemic really took a toll on us because we had staff capacity as well as just priorities to our members on what they wanted, and we had such a growing, and we still do, which I'm very thankful for, is that we have such a growing Latin American and Middle East region that our priorities just had to shift based on our membership. But we're so happy to have our wonderful staff. We were able to hire essentially 2 new people in the past 6 months, and then us as officers, we hired a wonderful executive director this past April, and all these amazing, fresh eyes, reassessing what AIS is. That's one part of President Cooper Moore and I's theme this year was just to reblank. So reevaluate, revamp, revitalize, all these wonderful rewords. And Ask an Architect was just one of those things that we knew that it could get us really back in touch with alumni, but also with professionals that want to talk with students.
Well, I think that's super important, and I'm so glad you guys are doing that. And I think it's what spurred me to respond back when I got the email, because the fact that the more architects you speak to, the more you find out about what it is that we do in our profession. And it isn't even just us that are involved in the design profession, it's the general public. One of the things that we spearheaded when I was board president in San Francisco is that there's this aloofness that people feel that architects have about them, that they're on a pedestal, that they have these egos. And I think the majority of the greater architects in our profession are anything like that. Yes, you have your prima donnas, but really we're more, people centric. And I think you've demonstrated that as well. And so one of the things that I really promoted was that our chapter office was on the 6th floor of the Willis Polk building in the downtown financial district of San Francisco near Union Square. Well, one of the things that the pandemic taught us, since then, the pandemic proved this, but when I was the board president, is I said, we need to expand our influence. We need to reach out to the people, and we need to be accessible. Being up on the 6th floor in an area where you can't even park your car and just walk in and talk to somebody and just ask a question, and there's not even architects on the staff, was one of the things that led to our being able to take the ground floor of that same building where people, because it's a great walkable community in San Francisco. People could just walk in off the street, ask to speak to an architect, ask, what can I do? What can you do for me? And so this year, we are obviously not coincidentally, I guess, we are hosting the national conference, and we're opening that new headquarters on the ground floor. So that was 2015, do the math, 8 years later, we're finally getting there, and it's been a challenge. but I think that's one of the things that I contributed to, and I'm happy to see coming about. So I think that speaks to who we are and what we do and who we do it for. So hopefully we'll meet some of you guys during the national conference. I definitely will be attending, and go out there and make your connections.
Absolutely. And what a amazing note to end off on. Yeah, I think we'll probably cut it here. And then our lovely staff will edit it and post it accordingly. But now that you're mentioning San Francisco, Cooper and I and Larry are definitely attending. We're gonna be maybe arriving, yeah, I could look at a calendar. We might arrive a day or two early, and we are planning actually to have a reception of some sorts, just calling alumni and professionals and inviting the AIA component to come essentially just hang out, relax before the conference starts. And we'd love for you to come. And if anyone else who is interested, we're going to be invited. I believe in San Fran we have, I want to say 3 or 4 schools that's in the area, and then more students who just come by because it's on the coast. So we'll definitely hold a reception. We still don't know our location yet. So if you have any suggestions, let us know, and we'll definitely set out an invite.
Well, there's a number of places where you can stay and where you can go. I think our chapter will probably assist you with all of that. So definitely reach out to Stacy, the executive director there. The other thing that I would quickly mention is, if you do get a chance to travel and you do want to do something that is a little more intimate than the national conference, every 2 years in October is the Monterey Design Conference. It is a superbly inspirational and intimate view of architects from around the world who come and speak to the rest of us here in the Bay Area. And it's set down in the Monterey Peninsula. And it is an amazing treat.
Absolutely. And is it so? I assume it happened last year, and will it happen next year?
Yes, yeah. So 2024 is going to be the next one, and it's in a Julia Morgan design set of buildings, right on the coast, and you meet a great bunch of folks. It's a great retreat, and an opportunity to charge and be inspired, and it's put on by AIA, the California AIA California.
Okay, lovely. Yeah, I'll definitely mark it on our calendars. Unfortunately, the president and I are our terms are only from July to July. So it most likely will be our next set of president and vice presidents that will be attending. But you never know. We'll be professionals
Come
by
on
then.
your own.
Yeah, exactly.
It's worth the trip. Yeah, absolutely. That's why I mentioned it.
Cool. Okay, sorry, I'm just writing a note so I don't lose it in the future. Cool. Lovely. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, that's all for me. Thanks so much for hopping on.
My pleasure.
It was a wonderful conversation. It's so nice to reconnect. Yeah, we'll definitely I'll be in touch with San Francisco for sure.
Well, you guys know how to reach me if you need anything else.
Exactly. Thank you. Have a good day.
Take care. Enjoy the rest of your week.
You too. Bye.